There's also the question of what she offered each of the company. The hobbits were probably all some sort of food and comfort. Gimli, maybe gold and riches, a nice smithy to work. Legolas, a free wood to walk in. Aragorn, I bet she offered him the chance to stay in Lothlorien with Arwen, just completely at peace. Boromir, though, is an interesting one. I feel like the general consensus is she offered him the ring. But I don't really think so. I think she offered him, hello everybody, welcome to Aude and Tulava, where we are walking our way through Tolkien's Legendarium. Today we are in chapter 7 of book 2, The Mirror of Galadriel. If you like what we do here and would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe. There are a few of my favorite different versions of the books linked in the description at different price points, and channel memberships are open if you'd like to support the channel that way. All right, let's dive in. The company got a little introduction to Lothlorien over the last couple of weeks, but finally they get to see the heart of Lothlorien. Suddenly they came out into the open again and found themselves under a pale evening sky, prickled by a few early stars. There was a wide, treeless space before them, running in a great circle and bending away on either side. Beyond it was a deep fosse lost in soft shadow, but the grass upon its brink was green, as if it glowed still in memory of the sun that had gone. Upon the further side there rose to a great height a green wall encircling a green hill thronged with malorn trees, taller than any they had seen yet in all the land. Their height could not be guessed, but they stood up in the twilight like living towers. In their many-tiered branches and amid their ever-moving leaves, countless lights were gleaming green and gold and silver. Haldir turned toward the company. "Welcome to Caras Galadhon," he said. "Here is the city of the Galathrim, where dwell the Lord Celeborn and Galadriel, the Lady of Lorien. But we cannot enter here, for the gates do not look northward. We must go round to the southern side, and the way is not short, for the city is great." They finally get to see the city in Lothlorien. Now, I don't think I went over this when the company tried to cross the pass of Carathras, but when a word has like a DH in it, it's a hard th sound. It's like the rather than thought. So the city in Lothlorien is Caras Galadhon. I know I get it wrong still sometimes, but I do try to get it right. Just a note in case you didn't know. So after walking all day and a bit of another one, the company has to walk all the way around the city to get to the gates. But they finally arrive and walk through the gates of this legendary dwelling of the elves. They went along many paths and climbed many stairs until they came to the high places and saw before them amid a wide lawn a fountain shimmering. It was lit by silver lamps that swung from the boughs of trees, and it fell into a basin of silver from which a white stream spilled. Upon the south side of the lawn there stood the mightiest of all the trees. Its great smooth bole gleamed like gray silk, and up it towered until its first branches, far above, opened their huge limbs under shadowy clouds of leaves. Beside it a broad white ladder stood, and at its foot 3 elves were seated. Tolkien just paints a ridiculously great picture here. It's ethereal, ephemeral, silver lamps shining on a fountain falling into a silver basin. It's like when they built this city, they took the silver light of the moon and worked it into everything. The malorn trees themselves seem to embody the light of the moon. And since the moon is the last fruit of Telperion, the silver tree of Valinor, it could very well be Galadriel trying to surround herself with the light she will never be able to see again. They finally get to the highest flet in the biggest tree and get to see Galadriel and Celeborn. To get an idea of the size of the tree and the flet they hang out in, think about this. Tolkien says that on the flet, so not just the flet, but on it was a house so big it could almost serve as a hall of men. So I did a little Googling, just serious research. An Old English hall could be around 50 feet by 25 feet. Again, that's a giant house that's built on top of a flet that's in a tree. Can we just kind of appreciate for a second how massive that is? It's insane. But they get to finally see Galadriel and Celeborn, and it's noted they are both really tall, and Galadriel no less tall than Celeborn. Unfinished Tales lets us know Galadriel was the tallest of all elf women of old and was about man high, according to the measure of the Dunedain and the men of old, which Hammond and Skull say is about 6'4". Can you imagine how small the hobbits are feeling right now? They already had Aragorn and Boromir, who about 6'6"-ish each, and now there are 2 more giant, beautiful elves. It's gotta be, I don't know, a little frustrating for them, or maybe they're just used to it by now. I don't know. As Celeborn greets the travelers, he even says to Gimli, "Welcome, Gimli, son of Glóin. It is long indeed since we saw one of Durin's folk in Caris Galadhon, but today we have broken our long law. May it be a sign that though the world is now dark, better days are at hand, and that friendship shall be renewed between our peoples. Gimli bowed low. So here we are, the feud finally over, sort of. Celeborn notices Gandalf is not with them and gets them to tell the story of their journey through Moria. But when Legolas and Gimli confirm that a Balrog was the end of Gandalf, Celeborn changes his tune a little bit. Alas, said Celeborn, we long have feared that under Caradhras a terror slept. But had I known the dwarves had stirred up this evil in Moria again, I would have forbidden you to pass the northern borders, you and all that went with you. And if it were possible, one would say that at the last Gandalf fell from wisdom into folly, going needlessly into the net of Moria. But even though he seems to be ultimately be laying the fault of the death of Gandalf at Gandalf's own feet, he's still able to blame the dwarves for stirring up the evil. Even though that evil appeared and killed the dwarves over 1,000 years ago, somehow it's still the fault of the dwarves for waking it. And that really shows his kind of default position on dwarves. Never mind the fact that Morgoth turned the Balrogs into the demons that they are, or maybe the fact that Sauron's espionage convinced Balin and company to try and reclaim Moria. He could have just mourned the fact that a Balrog is still alive and maybe start planning for maybe trying to deal with it once things start to hit the fan. It could be a big danger to them after all, but no, it's too bad you idiots messed around, woke it up, Gimli. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, just like your ancestors who attacked Menegroth. Okay? But luckily, Galadriel's there to make him hopefully feel a little bit awkward. He would be rash indeed that said that thing, said Galadriel gravely. Needless were none of the deeds of Gandalf in life. Those that followed him knew not his mind and cannot report his full purpose. But however it may be with the guide, the followers are blameless. Do not repent of your welcome to the dwarf. If our folk had been exiled long and far from Lothlorien, who of the Galathrim, even Celeborn the Wise, would pass nigh and would not wish to look upon their ancient home, though it had become an abode of dragons? Dark is the water of Kelidzarum, and cold are the springs of Kibil Nala, and fair were the many-pillared halls of Khazad-dûm in elder days, before the fall of mighty kings beneath the stone. She looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes, and it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy, and saw there love and understanding. Wonder came into his face, and then he smiled and answered. This is probably where I started to love Galadriel. And as I got older, I loved her even more. Not only does she shut Celeborn down, she does it in such a way where it's not super awkward for the company, and at least it seemed well taken by Celeborn, but also lifts up the person being belittled in such a way that he can only smile. She shows she cared enough to learn something about dwarves culture, and she displays understanding. But I think she still understands why Celeborn is the way he is. She knows and was probably there when Menegroth was attacked and Celeborn's grand uncle was killed by the dwarves for a necklace he thought was bought and paid for. And we see in Unfinished Tales why Tolkien says Galadriel was more farsighted about the dwarves than Celeborn. She looked upon the dwarves also with the eye of a commander, seeing in them the finest warriors to pit against the orcs. Moreover, Galadriel was a Noldo, and she had a natural sympathy with their minds and their passionate love of crafts of hand. Sympathy much greater than that found among many of the Eldar. The dwarves were children of Aule, and Galadriel, like others of the Noldor, had been a pupil of Aule and Yavanna in Valinor. She also passed through Moria on her way from Eriador to Lothlorien. Galadriel was taught by the same Vala who created the dwarves. I think she possibly feels some sort of kinship with them. It may be that Aule even told her about his beautiful creation. He could have told her that if she ever travels to Middle-earth, she could speak to Durin and tell them all about her time with Aule. Maybe even after Melkor came through and destroyed the trees, Aule caught her before she left and told her to go help the dwarves and warn them of Melkor to help keep them safe. I'm clearly kind of just making this up, but that's the kind of vibe I get here from Galadriel. She seems to really know who Gimli is without even speaking to him before now. And her light rebuke of Celeborn leads him to apologize to Gimli, which is kind of amazing. And Galadriel continues speaking to the rest of the company. Your quest is known to us, said Galadriel, looking at Frodo. But we will not here speak of it more openly, yet not in vain will it prove, maybe, that you came to this land seeking aid, as Gandalf himself plainly purposed. For the Lord of the Galadriel is accounted the wisest of the elves of Middle-earth, and a giver of gifts beyond the power of kings. He has dwelt in the west since the days of dawn, and I have dwelt with him years uncounted. For ere the fall of Nargothrond or Gondolin, I passed over the mountains, and together through the ages of the world we have fought the long defeat. Now, this paragraph has so much in it to talk about. First, how is their, specifically Frodo's quest, known to her? Yes, they received messengers telling them of the company, but those messengers left before it was decided who was going to be in the company. So how does she know so much? Osanwe Kenta. It's talked about in Morgoth's Ring and in The Nature of Middle-earth, referencing Tolkien's inquiry into the communication of thought. So Osanwe Kenta is exactly that, communication by thought. I won't go into it too deeply here, partially because I only sort of understand it, but Corey Olsen does a good job as he went through Nature of Middle-earth in his Mythgard Academy series. But yes, it's communication by thought. It's not exactly reading minds, however. Both parties have to be willing and agree to participate. And we see a hint of this a few pages earlier when Celeborn says, Elrond is far away and darkness gathers between us. Celeborn here was essentially saying they didn't get any news from Elrond regarding a change in plans, so they're surprised Gandalf isn't there with the others. On top of that, Galadriel says of Gandalf, but I cannot see him from afar unless he comes within the fences of Lothlorien. A gray mist is about him, and the ways of his feet and of his mind are hidden from me. So to me, this clearly insinuates his mind is not normally hidden from her. So they're speaking to each other through thought. Pretty cool. And this next point I want to bring up was actually brought to my attention recently because of a post on Reddit. Why does Galadriel call Celeborn the wisest of the elves of Middle-earth? Kind of seems like she's throwing both herself and Elrond under the bus. But I think it's a way for her to prop him up while also keeping herself and Elrond on a little bit of a different level. And it lies in a definition of the word of. One of the definitions of is this, indicating an association between two entities, typically one of belonging. Why is this important? Celeborn is of Middle-earth. He was born there and his parents were born there. Galadriel was born in Valinor. Well, Elrond was born in Middle-earth too. Sure, you can trace Elrond's line back and he comes from a Maya and an elf that saw the light of the trees. Celeborn is the wisest of all elves whose lineage never leaves Middle-earth. I think this perfectly satisfied the question of how can Celeborn be the wisest elf of Middle-earth when he's married to Galadriel. And lastly, we hear of the long defeat of the elves. What is the long defeat? I'm sure other people have different views of it, but here's how I kind of see it. Elves are tied to Arda, to the world. They are serially longeval, but not technically immortal, because once the world dies, so will they. Their spirits will vanish with the world. So no matter what they do, even if they conquer evil, they, all of them, will perish. It sounds pretty sad, and I mean it is. But that's what their story is. Their body, the Heroa, can die, and their spirit, Fea, will persist as long as the earth does. Men, on the other hand, nobody knows. It's possible their spirits leave the circle of the world and go to live with Eru. That would fit kind of with Tolkien's Catholic faith, but they acknowledge they are fighting the long defeat and still fight. Galadriel even says, yet hope remains while all the company is true. So even though she knows hers is the long defeat, she provides the company with some needed hope, with Amdir, which is so important for most of the company because I don't think they truly understand, they don't truly understand Estel and they don't understand what it entails. Now, as we draw the conversation to a close, Galadriel tests each and every one of the company. And with that word, she held them with her eyes and in silence looked searchingly at each of them in turn. None save Legolas and Aragorn could long endure her glance. Sam quickly blushed and hung his head. Now, I think this is kind of some form of Osanwe Kenta, but maybe not truly. I think she can take the measure of someone without fully questioning them. The eyes are the window to the soul, after all. What I really love kind of about this part is the hobbitry that follows. What did you blush for, Sam? Said Pippin. You soon broke down, and anyone would have thought you had a guilty conscience. I hope it was nothing worse than a wicked plot to steal one of my blankets. I never thought no such thing, answered Sam in no mood for jest. If you want to know, I felt as if I hadn't got nothing on and I didn't like it. She seemed to be looking inside me and asking me what I would do if she gave me the chance of flying back home to the Shire to a nice little hole with a bit of garden of my own. And literally, as I'm reading this right now, that pause, Shire to nice little hole with with a bit of garden of my own. He was gonna say with rosy cotton. Whew, love Sam. Now, I can only really see this as Pippin trying to deflect and feel better after feeling embarrassed himself. And who better to pick up on that than lowly Sam? But this was the test I spoke about earlier. It seems like Galadriel was offering each person their own strongest desire. But I don't think she was testing them just for the sake of testing them. She was measuring them. I don't really know what her plan was. Maybe because she said she couldn't really see Gandalf, she thought he was still alive and planned to give him some information to help him when he passed through. I don't fully know. Love to hear what you think. Why did Galadriel test everybody like this? But there's also the question of what she offered each of the company. The hobbits were probably all some sort of food and comfort. Gimli, maybe gold and riches, a nice smithy to work. Legolas, a free wood to walk in. Aragorn, I bet she offered him the chance to stay in Lothlorien with Arwen, just completely at peace. Boromir, though, is an interesting one. I feel like the general consensus is she offered him the ring. But I don't really think so. I think she offered him the power to protect Gondor. I think any thought of the ring was then inserted by Boromir as the solution. She offered him power, and he assumed she meant the ring. This is another kind of one of those things I can't prove, but it just feels right. Boromir, of course, was not having any of it. To me, it seemed exceedingly strange, said Boromir. Maybe it was only a test and she thought to read our thoughts for her own good purpose. But almost I should have said that she was tempting us and offering what she pretended to have the power to give. It need not be said that I refused to listen. The men of Minas Tirith are true to their word. But what he thought the lady had offered him, Boromir did not tell. So here I think Boromir is of the same mind as Pippin. He's ashamed of how enticed he was by what she offered. He finishes his little speech saying, well, men of Minas Tirith are true to their word. It's almost like he's saying that to kind of reassure himself. No, I won't break. I will see this through. But he does want power. Remembering forward, Faramir tells Frodo Boromir was displeased his father was not the king, going so far as to say, how many hundreds of years needs it to make a steward a king if the king returns not, he asked. Maybe he was given the choice to become king of Gondor and not have the true king return. He's feeling ashamed because he's standing right next to the rightful king. It's sad. I think he feels very deep shame right now and he's trying to figure out an outlet for it. Well, have a care, said Boromir. I do not feel too sure of this elvish lady and her purposes. But Aragorn's not letting someone speak that way about Galadriel. Speak no evil of the Lady Galadriel, said Aragorn sternly. You know not what you say. There is in her and in this land no evil unless a man bring it hither himself. Then let him beware, but tonight I shall sleep without fear for the first time since I left Rivendell. And may I sleep deep and forget for a while my grief. I am weary in body and in heart. He cast himself down upon his couch and fell at once into a long sleep. So here it's January 17th. They have been on the move since December 25th. That's a while to have a constant stress of life and death. It wears on you, at least I can imagine. And the whole company falls asleep. Now let's end part 1 of this chapter by letting Tolkien's prose explain the peace they had while sleeping. The others soon did the same, and no sound or dream disturbed their slumber. When they woke, they found that the light of day was broad upon the lawn before the pavilion, and the fountain rose and fell, glittering in the sun. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next week, we should be able to finish up the Mirror of Galadriel. Until next time, always remember, out into the day shall come again.